Do what thou will be the whole piece of law.
Welcome back, or if this is your first time, welcome. Today is a very special topic to me because we are doing a return to form, right? We started that almost a year ago with a video called Francis E Dec, the man who tried to save the world, or something along those lines. We went from a nice, hopeful Francis E Dec in this archive to watching the downfall of a man who probably didn't have any sanity to begin with, but was sentenced to decay into a nightmare-style life. A life that really doesn't have much to look forward to, and it devolved. And I want to say this is the pinnacle, or if you're not talking about this as a mountain climb, but rather a descent, this is the bottom of the hole, and there are a couple reasons why. Now, if you're going to watch this video, and I think it is worth your time, especially if you love seeing people decay right in front of your eyes as grains of sand through your fingers, you need to know about a man named Francis E Dec. Now, I could say go watch the entirety of the context, which I will, but if you want the SparkNotes version so you can at least enjoy this video, Francis E Dec lived in Nassau County in the 1960s to the 1980s is when we're mainly covering, but he was born in the 1920s. He was a very eccentric man who believed that a entity called the Computcr God controlled every aspect of his entire life and sent people and things and creatures to stalk or undetectably exterminate him in the middle of the night. Now, what makes him special from your garden variety schizophrenic? He's remarkably consistent. If this seems interesting, this is consistent with all the other writings that he has that I've covered on my channel that I have put into one long playlist so that you can watch them all together. And this one's a bit shorter, so think of this as a primer. And if it piques your interest, feel free to go and find the Computcr God hole, because this is the bottom. You're effectively working from the bottom up. This is the worst he will ever get. And I think this is the only time when I have to preface that there are a few things wrong with this rant. And by wrong, I mean different. This rant has letters replaced with other letters. These letters are the letter E. He really has a complex around E and S. S is hypothesized by my translator and me. After it was brought to my attention, I also subscribed to this, that S is the 19th letter of the alphabet, and he has a complex around the number 19 being part of the worst bank account number in the history of the universe, begin and end with death. It's basically a Computcr God marking that has sentenced him to be exterminated. So he does not use the letter S in this rant, nor the letter E. He has replacements for other ones, so I'm going to put the unedited text on the screen, and if the reading sounds a little bit less confident than usual, it's because I had a hard time reading it from the directly transcribed documents. Also, as is tradition, as a public service, I'm going to be putting the transcribed version down in the description. No, I'm not going to help you read it by making them comprehensible words. You can interpret it for yourself. But with all that out of the way, we actually get to step into the deadly nightmare of Francis E Dec Esquire. Most important, village Hempstead officials, Mayor D. Miller, many police, communication police Leo Daly, like crazy Harry Steinway, have no high school, no training, no experience. I dared not to move into my duplex houses, 26 through 28 Samus Place, Hempstead, New York. The neighborhood was infected with gangster government underlings. Their teenage and college sons repeatedly broke my windows and staged rampages, football and baseball on my lawn, even when rented, and as soon as vacant, broke in and burglarized and vandalized my well-furnished 2 houses. The neighborhood threw discarded junk into my yard. The co-conspiring gangster police and judges intimidated me and wasted my time. Wantonly vicious was ex-village cop, parentheses, quiet official cover-up removed for his felonious and twice transferred to the building inspector, end parentheses, lifelong notorious felon puppet building inspector, repeatedly feloniously trespassed the rear yard and by pounding on the rear door in police state manner entered to make illegal inspections, which frightened my tenants from 26 through 28 Samus Place until I was forced to abandon renting the 2 houses. Crazy Harry Steinway warned that, quote, if we in the village office know that Francis Dec is the real owner and that we're out to get that Dec, unquote, I made complaints to the co-conspiring gangster parroting puppet village officials to no avail in order to quote-unquote shut me up forever with my secrets. These gangster village officials, etc., and police were already massively attempting repeated, parentheses, aforementioned, undetectable exterminations against me. As parroting puppet, even you know my life was a deadly nightmare. I began to hide cooped up in this low old house, well fenced in tall hedges and barbed wire. Francis E Dec. I've been finding that it's harder to record for this one because I normally like to try and reference the rant as I'm speaking to get my thoughts in order, but it's just completely illegible at a glance. So I'm gonna try and interpret it as best I can. First of all, throw some slander public officials. That is kind of expected. Second of all, he is mainly going to talk about his rental properties. He has a duplex at 26 through 28 Samus Place. Now, this is a rental property that he talks about in a couple other rants, and his main house is somewhere different. Now, I feel comfortable saying these addresses, and it's not doxing, because these have been long since demolished and relabeled by the city, as if to erase his existence, the computer god knew. But this archive is so heavily encoded, maybe it holds special computer god secrets. He talks about kids playing in his lawn, which would not be an issue, except for the fact that he says this is obviously the work of the computer god gangster underlings. They send their kids to go and play sports in my yard, even though it's a shoestring yard and I can't even mow it. He also talks about this building inspector. His name is Harry Steinway, and it kind of sounds like the moment in Smiling Friends where he's like,
it's a standard random
and Francis E Dec
inspection.
runs up and he's like,
Alan, we are so fucked.
He then says, oh, I didn't let this building inspector do his inspections, and then he uses these cop tactics to get in my back door and secretly inspect my house so that he can throw me out because they're all targeting him, because everyone in the office knows that Francis Dec is a no-good traitor, and they're all scheming against him because he wants to rent out this to tenants, and he actually gets tenants. He doesn't like them, but normally when he says, oh yes, these people want to shut me up forever and facilitate my undetectable extermination, it's because he's trying to expose the computer god grand conspiracy. This is how I can kind of tell that it's getting worse, because it's not now that he's trying to expose the computer god conspiracy, ergo he now must be destroyed. It is, oh, I want to exist. Oh, you must be destroyed. I feel like that's the natural progression. He kind of throws the reasoning out the window. It's now not, the computer god is virtually absent, which I am noticing in the later rants where he's kind of just going off about whatever life problems he's having. The computer god really only is referenced as this shadowy controller of it all. There's nothing about its machinations or schemes. This is kind of just his personal beef with, some building inspector because he can't rent out his properties for money anymore, which is really, I guess, one of his only forms of income, because, oh, they want to shut me up forever with my secrets. Also, yes, in case I forgot to mention it, that is an actual occurrence of the letter E as a part of his acronym. Now, I was talking with my transcriber today about what his complex with the letter E was, and I would like theories if anyone has theories, but it's that it's his middle initial and that he has to use it so much. It's like it's another one of those computer god markers for extermination, extermination, Francis E Dec. Also, the fact that he puts up barbed wire in his residential abode and puts up tall hedges, which are attested to, not the barbed wire, but the hedges. It's like this fortress that he's set up for himself that he refuses to interact with anyone else. And it's shocking to see. But he wants to talk a little more about his brothers, so I'm inclined to let him, as he will continue with his deadly nightmare. Joseph I Dec, parentheses, my only living relative brother, end parentheses, at that time miraculously was anointed assistant deputy high court clerk, parentheses, gunslinger, peace officer, end parentheses, in spite of his physical berserk assaults upon me, I still supported him, living in the back room of my law office, and later here in my house, suspecting that he was an untouchable underling. I generously offered him half of all profits if he moved into my said Samus Place house, repaired the broken window, etc., and using his useless legal and real estate licenses, I do all the legal work to sell said houses. He moved moved into Samus Place and secretly, suddenly married a kosher woman, parentheses, quote, at her amusement, promising her my houses and everything I own because of my undetectable extermination was imminent, end parenthesis, start parenthesis, her father is his age, end parenthesis. Now, I know that one was a little short, but I want to cover it because I'm just going to let him go because it's another one big massive paragraph and try and cover that all at once because this is, I feel, another little view into his personal life that I kind of wanted to discuss, and I didn't want to really touch Joseph Dec much because I want to agglomerate it into one big video that I'm going to try and get out. I don't want to say for the channel anniversary, but like early May, late April, I want to get it out. And then I can finally put this saga to bed, even though I'm really nervous to do so. But, actually about the rant itself, he talks about Joseph E Dec, which if you don't know is his brother, which he states, and he is during this time promoted to Assistant Deputy High Court Clerk, which he talks about more in the Supreme Court video. Go watch it. I still put an insane amount of effort into that video, and I will not stop plugging it. And he says it's a miracle that he was even promoted based on this domestic abuse against me, but he then goes, whatever, I still supported him. I guess that shows you how tightly knit the Polish family structure is. Oh, when I gave him my houses and I had to live in the back of my law office, and I basically bribed him so I could sell the houses while he was living there, and I gave him half of all the rent, and then because he knew I wouldn't approve, he went behind my back and married this woman that I had no idea about, and she's old and I don't like her, and he promised her everything and she lives with these people that I don't like, and he then insinuates before calling her, like, because he uses the word hag, which I cut out of the narration, which implies that she's old, but then you get the things like her father is his age, which implies that he's crib robbing, so she's super young, and he also says, oh, she's promising her all of my stuff because he's a part of the police department, so they will undetectably exterminate me, and then he'll get all my stuff, and then he can give her all of my stuff after I've been undetectably exterminated by his connections. Very high opinion of his brother, by the way, but I'm gonna let him go off, and then we'll do a little bit of a wrap-up and a little bit of a future. Your only hope for a future? We're getting near the end, and I'm a little afraid, which is kind of why this took so long from the last time I did it, despite other factors. I just don't want it to be over. I don't want to leave this archive. I don't want to get rid of the radio controls in my head. But anyway, let's let Francis go off. We'll do a summary and then a wrap-up, okay? It continues, quote, next, Francis E Dec legally robbed of all my property by commie gangster computer god Frankenstein earphone radio gangster government conspiracy with absolutely no notice to me, the aka my professional alias, end parenthesis, Lawrence J. Gilbeman the first, the sole and recorded owner of 26 through 28 Samus Place, parentheses, after J.I. Dec moved in, end parenthesis. Years ago, all of my tax bills, etc. were changed to Joseph E Dec, parenthesis, footnote, when purchased, I then suspected gangster government sneak assassin Judas Joseph E Dec. I made him one of the signed, disinterested witnesses to my said recorded deed, end parenthesis. For many months, orally and in detailed letters, I repeatedly complained about this even to the gangster county clerk, like the co-conspiring attorney general. They all ignored me until I wrote these many, many letters. Then suddenly Joseph E Dec's name was removed and my said name was replaced, but Joseph E Dec, parenthesis, gangster government peace officer, end parenthesis, still thereafter repeatedly warned me, laughingly stating, quote, now that you are framed upon ex-con, the cops can't wait to croak me before I reach the front porch of my house, 26 through 28 Samus Place, and this will save him the job of doing it, unquote. An honest threat and warning from Joseph E Dec to me when I was a teenager. Joseph E Dec, maritime officer, demented drug user, murdered his paramour, Mrs. Stacia Verona Bonful, a young married mother, solely because he was my anointed assassin. Government computer god direct orders. The nearby neighbor, chief district attorney, jeering Nassau County, secreted her murder as a... Since then, county-wide, Joseph E Dec's many felonies and crimes have been so secreted. NCPD headquarters silenced
Ellis Hassner, Crimes by Joseph I. Dec. She confided, quotes, "He is some kind of high bribe pay, crazy police stooge. He smoked pot, the winehead. He's crazy dangerous, robs you, hates you, and wants to kill you, Francis." Parentheses, terrified to get rid of Joseph I. Dec. I passed her on to him for very poor, very beautiful dream girl marriage. In vain, like many other girls. No end to the parentheses, but I assume this is where it ends. I need the money from the sale of my 26 through 28 Samus Place houses to raise my only recourse in real terror and sadness. I, with hundreds of legal appearances in many of this county's gangster computer god controlled and manipulated chicanerous gangster judge courts, I know there is less than no opportunity to secure even this present scintilla of justice for me in the chicanerous gangster judge courts. For your only hope for a future, Francis E Dec, Esquire.
So yeah, sometimes that's all I can say. What does this mean, though? I need to look at what this means. Where he describes how his brother wants to, quote, rob him of all of his property, and if we take him at face value, it really is. He has an alias, Lawrence J. Gilbman, which I don't think it's the first. I think that's my professional alias, Lawrence J. Gilbman, and then goes on, I, the sole and recorded owner of 26 through 28 Samus Place. He then says, oh yeah, I had them under this alias, and then when my brother moved in, all the utility bills suddenly came in under his name, and he then says, oh, it's my brother's fault because he has these connections to the government, and as my private computer god assassin has all these ways to silence me. When he then complains and says, hey, this guy's trying to steal all of my property, no one talks to him, even all the way up to the attorney general, and then he's like, I started writing all my letters trying to expose the computer god's grand conspiracy, and then they suddenly change all the names back. Wow, it's almost like they were covering it up until I started complaining. It's like he had his little internet drama that was just between him and someone else, and then I made a public post on my twitter.com, and then everything was fixed. And then his brother threatens him, saying, oh, I'll just undetectably exterminate you before you even reach the porch of my house. And he then goes into a murder that his brother might be responsible for when he was in the Coast Guard, but I'm not gonna try and touch that with a 10-foot pole. It might be in the accumulated one, and then I'll insert the section here, but it's not gonna be in this video because, frankly, I don't want to touch Joseph I. Dec with a 10-foot pole at this moment. I kind of want to give an accumulated summary biography, and it was, he might have murdered this person, and then it was covered up as a self-extermination, and there was this woman who wasn't mentioned in the recording because my transcriber missed it. Elise Hassner confessed to Francis about everything that, Joseph Dec's done. It's like, oh yeah, he's pissing hot, he's some overpaid police officer, he's deranged, he wants to exterminate you, Francis, he wants to get rid of you, and he then sells her off as like a bribe, and if I remember correctly, this is like his childhood crush, so he kind of says, oh, I'm selling her off for perfect dream girl marriage because he wanted to marry her but never could. And another thing that my transcriber kind of left out, because my transcriber, he misses lines sometimes, I think that's the baseline, and one of the lines that he missed was, I need to sell my house to raise my financial status above the average welfare recipient. And he has all these legal cases that he needs to pay for, and he says, I can't pay for all these legal cases without the money from selling my houses, and without being able to resolve all these cases, I'm not even going to get one scintilla of justice, which honestly sounds pretty terrible. But then he ends off with the classic, your only hope for a future, as he descends into madness. And this is by far, I'm comfortable saying, one of the last rants before he has his episode. I want to say maybe like 1987, because this is where he kind of goes terminal. I'm talking like chapter 6 of Everywhere at the End of Time type terminal, where he has only like little breaches of lucidity every so often. Everything's filtered through this computer god lens, and he has to live, in his own words, this deadly nightmare. My life was a deadly nightmare, and probably is. I would have used is, but what's the future of Francis E Dec? Well, I might do a scraps video, I might not do a scraps video. I'm probably going to post a poll today about whether that scraps video should just be included into the massive Francis E Dec video that agglomerates everything into one digestible walk through the computer god's archivist halls, or I should make a tidbits video and then glop it all together. But regardless of that, there will be a Computcr God delusion video, and I aim for that to be the definitive Francis E Dec block that I can then link to everything that we have, and finally put Francis E Dec into his Napoleonic coffin with like 8 different layers so he never gets out again. And I don't say that out of hatred, I say that out of love. And if anything new comes up, you'll be the first to hear from me, because I would like to brand myself as the definitive Francis E Dec commentator. After that, I'm probably going to move on to a new style of iceberg video that I'm not going to say anything about just yet, because I want to keep my trade secrets. I'm working with my editor on it, and hopefully it's how I'll cut my teeth in the growth sphere, because this is really a personal project. The next one's going to be personal with a little bit of business. So we'll see. Big we'll see. And I also wanted to remind you, in case you have been a little slow on the uptake, I kind of assume everyone's competency, but for the Computcr God parroting puppet algorithm, I kind of need to say, please like, comment, and subscribe, hype the video, do whatever, comment something about how your life is a deadly nightmare. And even though we endeavor against the Computcr God at every single step of the way, we still need to obey if we want our message to get out, right? Parroting puppet whose Frankenstein controls I can touch into and beam this message directly into your head. Remember, I'm still empowered with this type of thing. So the next Francis E Dec video will either be the super big one that I'm going to put an astronomical amount of effort into, or a tidbits video and then the astronomical amount of effort video. So just remember, if you ever own a rental property, make sure you don't put your brother in there because he'll probably use his governmental connections to steal it from you until you make a public Twitter post about how it's happening, and then it will be immediately solved somehow.